I imagine that maybe you can hear us now. Please let us know.
Okay, good.
Perfect. Well, it's 7:02 and we do have quite a lot to get through today, so we'll get started. I would expect people will continue to drift in as we go here. But to begin with, good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us. My name's Steve Bentley. I'm a co-founding member of the Calgary Climate Hub and the host of the monthly Climate Lens podcast. Here in Calgary, we're based out of the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yaxi Nakota Nations, the Métis Nations of Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. A big welcome to all of you who are on the call tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. A few housekeeping items. This is a public event, so if you'd like to change your display name for personal or privacy reasons, please go ahead and do so. You have that ability. There is a Q&A link going into the chat, so feel free to place your questions in there, and we're going to try to get to those later on. We will be asking questions that you can answer in the chat. We hope you find time to engage with that throughout the evening. A reminder, let's please stay respectful of one another. We're trying to create a safe space for people to share and learn. We won't be tolerating any inappropriate or abusive behavior in the chat. I can tell you as a former bouncer, evictions have never been easy. You just press a button and poof, you're out of there. So this is something that we all want to learn about and should all be interested in addressing. So let's carry that with us going through this. It seems like we are expecting members of this Alberta government to show up and pay attention and listen. If you are indeed here, thank you for showing up. We appreciate you being here and listening to Albertans. We also have representatives from surface rights groups, and agricultural associations here tonight, as well as civil society groups. And as I said earlier, people from across the urban and rural divide. We expect that we have some members of the media joining us tonight as well. Thank you for covering tonight's event and this important issue. So, here tonight to talk about a big issue. That's what we're doing here. More than 300,000 oil and gas wells are littered across this land that need to be cleaned up now or in the very near future. This is a problem that affects every person in Alberta because the government and industry are cooking up a plan to leave all of us with a multi-billion-dollar cleanup bill. That's not going to happen. We're here tonight to learn about this problem, but also to talk about how we're going to get this industry to clean up their own mess, just like they always promised. And we're going to win. No matter our politics, I know everybody here cares about our province's air, land, and water and wants to protect it. This bridges the partisan divide. We love this place, and that's why we're going to fight to protect it. As I'm going to tell you a little bit about why this matters to me, and as I do that, consider putting into the chat why this matters to you. And there's going to be a poll that's placed in there. It talks about, why you're here tonight, whether it's just because you want to learn more, whether you're personally affected by oil and gas wells, or is it someone that you know is, or do you just simply not want to pay for this multi-billion-dollar cleanup? Share your reasons in the chat. There's a lot of reasons that I care about this topic, but the prime reason I'm fired up to be here tonight is really simple. Every single Albertan knows what a contract is and knows that a deal is a deal. And if one side of the deal gets what it wants, then tries to skip out on its part, then you broke the contract. And in any other walk of life or business, you'll be held accountable and you'll be made to pay up. For that, a government has to step up, not drive the getaway car. Sometimes right and wrong can be a matter of debate, and reasonable people can disagree, but not in this case. It's crystal clear, and it always has been. The polluter pays. Industry and our Alberta government have an obligation to ensure the deal they made with the landowners, the municipalities, and to every single person in Alberta gets honored and to clean up their mess, just like they always said they would. It's really that simple. Here's the plan for tonight. We're going to hear from some excellent speakers about this crisis and what it means for every Albertan. And between each speaker, We're going to give you a chance to get involved in the Clean Up Your Mess campaign and to help stop this government from leaving all of us with a huge mess and, again, a multi-billion-dollar cleanup. There's a Q&A function, as I mentioned. You can ask questions anytime. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentations. Now over to Philip to get us going. He's the campaign organizer with the Coalition of Responsible Energy.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Just making sure people can hear me. We're good? Yeah, okay, awesome. Yeah, hi, folks. My name is Philip Meinzer. I was born and raised here in Calgary. It's where I still live today. I currently work, as Steve mentioned, as a campaign organizer where I support a number of grassroots groups to achieve their goals, including the Coalition for Responsible Energy, or CARE, as we like to call it. It's a group that I helped to establish alongside some of the folks here tonight. CARE is a nonpartisan coalition of landowners, scientists, doctors, academics, and it also includes a number of Indigenous, environmental, health, and civil society organizations. Our group originally formed around shared concerns about the Alberta Energy Regulator, but we have since branched out into other related campaigns. But don't worry, we haven't forgotten about the AER. I'm here today to talk to you because the provincial government is planning to bring alarming changes to Alberta's oil well cleanup rules this fall. The government is calling it the Mature Asset Strategy, but it's really just a scheme that weakens industry's cleanup obligations at the expense of everyone here in Alberta and the land, water, and air we all depend on. I'll talk to you more about it in a minute. Okay, what are we talking about here? In Alberta, we've drilled over 470,000 wells over the past century. There's roughly one for every 10 people in this province, plus another 450,000 kilometers of pipelines and another 40,000 facilities. As you can see from the map on the left, this is just showing the wells, by the way, but this infrastructure is everywhere. It's in the middle of farmers' fields, it's on public lands, it's on Indigenous reserves, it's in urban areas, and it's even next to playgrounds. On the graph on the right, you can see in the blue that less than 60,000 of these wells are currently active, which means that they're producing more than 10 barrels a day. If you look at the red, there's nearly 270,000 of these wells that are at or near the end of their lives. They're not producing very much, or they've been inactive for decades and must get cleaned up. In Alberta and across Canada, the polluter pays principle is the law. It's pretty simple. You make a mess, you clean it up, and you pay for that cleanup. So what's it going to cost to clean up these wells? Let's forget about the pipelines and the facilities for just a moment. A 2021 estimate used the AER's own methods to develop a figure, and the best case scenario was 40 billion, worst case is 70 billion. But internal AER estimates actually say that it could be as high as 130 billion when those pipelines and facilities are included. Yet in Alberta, we currently hold less than 1% of those costs from the industry as security for when companies go bankrupt or fail to pay. And it's not just that the industry can't afford to pay for cleanup. In the past 4 years alone, so from 2021 through 2024, companies that operate in Alberta's oil and gas industry posted combined profits of almost 150 billion. That's profit, not revenue. Industry has more than enough money to pay, but our government and our regulator are failing to hold these companies accountable. So they give that money to shareholders and executives instead. And at the same time, companies are also offloading their wells onto smaller ones that can't afford cleanup and then go bankrupt, while bigger companies walk away money in hand. We're seeing more and more of this every few months, every year. We're also seeing companies refusing to pay their rent to landowners, also known as surface compensation, and skipping out on paying their municipal property taxes, which forces counties to cut services or raise taxes on everyone else. And we, like the public here in Alberta, we're already covering a number of these costs through subsidies and other government handouts, like the 1.7 billion in federal funding that was given to Alberta for cleanup back in 2020, or the 30 million that Albertans paid to cover unpaid rents to landowners last year. Many of these issues could be resolved if the current laws and regulations were being properly enforced, but instead our government has put together a plan that makes it even easier for companies to abandon their obligations at our expense. All right, so what's the mature asset strategy? It was released on April 3rd, and it includes 21 recommendations to manage mature oil and gas assets in Alberta. And it's essentially an industry wish list. We don't have time to go through each recommendation one by one, but some of the most egregious ones include passing legislation to create new entities that they're calling Harvest Co. and Closure Co., which are essentially crown corporations or similar to crown corporations, and they would acquire junk wells from companies, likely using public money. They're also proposing to repurpose well sites, like adding solar panels to sites as a way to avoid full cleanup. They're proposing to reduce reclamation standards, especially related to salts and gas venting. All right, the report also recommends this thing called risk-based closure, which seems about prioritizing the least expensive sites for cleanup because they want to be cost effective, which could mean that many wells go unplugged, especially those that are harder and more expensive to reclaim. The report also mentions that additional financial support could be used to accelerate cleanup, but it doesn't state where that money would actually come from, if not from taxpayers. And they also, they also state that they want to increase gas demand, potentially through AI data centers, to artificially raise gas prices. This would help to keep some of these wells profitable for longer, but then the rest of us would be forced to pay higher gas prices to keep them afloat. As I said before, it's an industry wish list. All right, what's going to happen when this goes through? These recommendations aren't going to fix the problem, but they will allow companies to leave their mess and walk away. The mature asset strategy risks violating the polluter pays principle because it lets companies dump their junk wells onto these closure co's and harvest co's, which essentially lets companies off the hook for cleanup and likely makes the public pay. The mature asset strategy will significantly reduce industry's accountability as weaker reclamation standards means decreased environmental protection for our air, land, and water. It's really another case of corporate welfare or reverse Robin Hood. It's stealing from the poor to give to the rich, plain and simple. Yes, some parts of the oil and gas sector are hurting, but that really doesn't justify the transfer of environmental burdens and costs associated with that to landowners and taxpayers. Public money should fund our public services like healthcare, education, infrastructure, environmental programs, and not line the pockets of oil and gas executives. I recognize that I'm not a rural Albertan, I'm a city boy. So even though I'm not directly impacted by this infrastructure on my land or right beside me, when I think about this problem, I really worry about our children and grandchildren's futures because what do our schools and hospitals look like if we spend billions of public money on cleanup? For example, that $70 billion cleanup figure, that could instead fund our entire 2025-26 education budget 7 times over. This money could and should go to our public servants. If industry doesn't pay, then each household in Alberta could be on the hook for more than $30,000. And I can't afford that kind of hit to my household finances. Can you? But perhaps even worse is what happens to Alberta's landscape and the ecosystems we rely on if all this infrastructure and damage is never properly cleaned up. I did also include, if you see on this slide, there's the little box on the right. This is actually from a recent analysis of the MAS done by professors at the University of Calgary, law professors. And they recently, just released an assessment of MAS. If you want to check it out, the link's there. You can also just go to their website, Ablog, to look it up, but essentially a pretty scathing review. If implemented, these recommendations would reward the industry that neglected its obligations with financial benefits and relaxed regulatory requirements. And that's why we're fighting this thing. And we need people like you in the audience speaking up and pushing back too. Our coalition, CARE, our group, we can't defeat the MAS on our own. Our campaign to date has focused largely on getting rural landowners involved and getting them to speak out against MAS because so much of this infrastructure is on their property. But we also need people from urban areas like Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, and Lethbridge. We need you pushing back as well because of the risk to our public services. And we have the chance to take action together right now. I'd like each of us to take a second to write a letter to your MLA, the energy minister, and our premier, telling each of them to reject the MAS. So if you go to the link here, and someone will copy it into the chat. Actually, I'll do it here. Just make sure we get it there. give everybody a minute or two. You can see on the QR code, you can go via the link. But if you go to our campaign website, there is an option there to take action and send a digital letter, which will go to your MLA, CC the energy minister, and our premier. So I'm going to give folks just like a minute or two to do that because I don't want to rush through this. So I'm just going to pause for a moment. Awesome. Seeing some duns coming back in the chat. If folks want to also, yeah, that's actually really helpful. If people want to say that they've sent once you're in the chat, that'd be awesome. Great. Getting a bunch of duns.
It's always excellent when you can attend one of these things. There's a clear call to action. That's one of the things that we're trying to do tonight is throughout the night, create these call to actions where you can take part and participate. And of course, you can always join the campaign. We need as much help as we can get.
All right. I think in an effort to make sure we stay on time, I think that's good. Folks save that link. If you haven't done it yet, go back to it after the presentation. But yes, you can go to cleanupyourmess.ca if you ever want to send one. So thank you all. We'll have more actions you can take throughout this program. But for now, I'd like to hand you off to the rest of our incredible panel. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Phil. Dr. Norm Campbell is a member of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, or CAPE. He's the chair of the Alberta Health Professionals for the Environment, professor emeritus in medicine, physiology, and pharmacology, and the community health sciences at the University of Calgary. And he's a member of the Libin, maybe pronouncing that wrong, it's either Libin or Libin, Cardiovascular Institute and the O'Brien Institute for Public Health. Dr. Campbell.
Oh, thanks so much. Can people hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Philip has talked about the financial and social costs to the public when the regulator lets the industry off hook for its cleanup bills. I'm here to talk about some of the adverse health impacts as well as environmental costs. I think it's important for everyone to realize that active wells or abandoned wells leak highly toxic substances into the environment. That's the air, the land, and the water. This is why they're so important to be plugged and reclaimed properly and as fast as possible after their activity has ceased. Wells leak methane and a variety of highly toxic pollutants into the environment. That impacts the health and well-being of families, communities with well sites nearby. But one can also say it impacts all life forms in the area. Just as an example, one of the pollutants is benzene, which is a highly toxic substance which is linked to a variety of blood cancers. A recent study found that over 500,000 Albertans live within 1.5 kilometers of an active or oil or gas well. And if we include abandoned and orphan wells, the number is much higher. The longer the regulator lets a well go unclaimed, the longer those living nearby will be impacted by these pollutants. The longer as well, the more people will be exposed. And there are associations between these pollutants and a variety of human diseases, variety of lung diseases, cancers, strokes, dementias, heart attacks, heart failures, an increase in birth defects and premature births and low birth rates. And that's why they must be cleaned up now. It can't wait for decades. These adverse health effects really are within the people living close to those wells. I'm always concerned personally about people, and I just wonder if these wells were in the backyard of Danielle Smith or a member of government, how fast would it be cleaned up? Probably very, very quickly. In addition, we need a lot more research on the adverse effects of these oil and gas wells on health, and we need monitoring of these adverse health implications in and around the wells. and that hasn't happened. And why isn't the Alberta regulator prioritizing these health issues? Every day the regulator lets industry dodge its cleanup obligations is another day that Albertans are going to face further harm. I'm just going to end on this point. What we're asking today is widely supported by Albertans. According to a recent survey in 2023, 94% of Albertans said oil and gas companies should pay for cleaning up their inactive and abandoned oil and gas wells. It's really time for the Alberta regulator to stop playing with our health and safety, make the polluters pay for the cleanup now, and protect the safety of all Albertans. Thank you so much. Happy to answer more questions on health concerns.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. This problem affects Albertans on so many levels. There's the huge cleanup bill the industry wants to dump on us, hundreds of thousands of hectares of land that can't be used for farming, commercial, or recreational use, and the huge risks to all of our health. And that's why we need to stop the mature asset strategy to protect our pocketbooks, but also our air, land, and water, and the health of the people we love. This campaign is just getting started, and we want you to be a part of it. So for our next action, we want to invite you to visit the Clean Up Your Mess website and sign up for their newsletter, the Drill and Dash Report. They'll be sending out news and updates about once a week about what's happening with the campaign and stories of how this issue is affecting everyday Albertans. This is how you can keep in touch with this movement and find ways to contribute to make sure that this travesty doesn't go down on our watch. You can do this now. The link is in the chat. So next up, I want to introduce someone who knows the implications of this issue firsthand. Dwight Popowich is retired after 45 years working in finance, building construction, the grain industry, and municipal government. For the past 26 years, Dwight and his wife Sharon have developed and lived on a 75-acre parcel of recreational farmland 5 minutes south of Two Hills, Alberta. He spends his retirement time as a visual artist and is active in his church and community. Dwight's here today to talk about the impact of an inactive gas well and related facilities on his land and on his life. Welcome, Dwight.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dwight Popowich, and I have an orphan gas well on my land near Two Hills, Alberta, which is just 100 kilometers east of Edmonton. The well was drilled 17 years ago in 2008, but produced for only 4 years. I was paid $2,500 a year in loss of use compensation by the company that expropriated my land for their well site. Now, let's be clear. The well on my land is not really an orphan. We know exactly who mom and dad is, that being Sequoia Resources Corporation. In 2016, Sequoia purchased the well on my well site on my land, along with thousands of other sites, for $1. Sequoia took on hundreds of millions of dollars in cleanup costs and would be bankrupt after being in business for only 18 months. They walked away from cleaning up the well on my land and thousands of others. Now it belongs to the Orphan Well Association. Just over a year ago, the Orphan Well Association told Sequoia landowners that we would have to wait another 10 to 12 years before the wells would be cleaned up. Why? Because the Orphan Well Association didn't have enough funds to keep up with their growing inventory of orphans as more and more new orphans entered the system. That meant the Alberta taxpayers could be paying up to 900 Sequoia landowners annual compensation for an extra decade or more, simply because the Alberta Energy Regulator didn't follow the orphan well funding or the annual levy setting rules, a regulatory failure that could eventually cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. The Orphan Well Fund is the industry-funded safety net that protects taxpayers and landowners from having to pay for the cleanup of bankrupt producers. The mature asset strategy would shift the responsibility from industry back onto the Alberta taxpayers by having us backstop or guaranteed a new orphan well model instead of just properly funding the current model. A current model we know works and is of zero financial risk to taxpayers. The mature asset strategy highlighted landowners' annual compensation and property tax payments as two major financial struggles for small producers. The strategy could push more annual landowner compensation payments onto the Alberta taxpayers and further undermine rural property tax bases and economies by letting producers not pay their fair share of property taxes or compensation. This could cause rural property tax rates to rise and or local municipality services to be lessened to make up for any shortfall in property tax revenues. The mature asset strategy lowers reclamation standards, lowers landowner values, and keeps production from land out of production. But it appears in 2025, Alberta, the squeaky wheel does get the grease. After 8 years of my complaining, the Orphan Well Association has now decided to not wait another decade. The well on my land, as has several other wells in my area, been recently plugged or abandoned, as the industry calls it. So it shouldn't be leaking dangerous vapors. But who really knows if that will be true in 25 years from now? The land has not yet been reclaimed, nor has the wellhead been removed. It's still in the middle of my alfalfa field, and I still have to work around it. That taxpayers are still paying me compensation for the site. Farmers and landowners across Alberta like me trusted oil and gas companies to clean up after the wells on their lands once they stopped producing. But many energy companies have betrayed Albertans and dumped their cleanup duties onto everybody else. I don't know about you, but in my community, we don't just dump our garbage onto our neighbor's land and tell them to pay for the cleanup. But that's what industry is doing here. It's un-Albertan and it's unethical. Now, I want to say something to this group, especially if you're dealing with a problem created by hosting oil and gas production on your land. We need you to be brave. If you have a story like mine about how you've been personally or negatively impacted by hosting oil and gas production on your land, we want to hear about it. Philip is going to share a link in the chat. If you have a story or know someone who does, please tell us about it. We won't share anything about without your permission. We need to share these stories so more Albertans understand how widespread this issue really is and build momentum to make these companies clean up their mess. Thank you for caring about your province.
Thanks so much for coming on, Dwight. Next, I want to introduce Susanne Calabrese, who's a lawyer at Ecojustice, Canada's largest environmental law charity, with a mission to use the law to defend nature and fight for a healthy environment for all. This spring, Ecojustice filed a complaint with the Alberta Ethics Commissioner about how the mature asset strategy was developed. We're going to hear a little more about that now. Welcome, Susanne.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hello, everyone. Now, the mature asset strategy made a lot of waves in the news when it was released last April, mostly because it appeared to advise the Alberta government to shift the cleanup cost and burden for inactive and marginal wells away from industry. And it seemed to prioritize industry interests over those of the Alberta public. And I had met with Mr. Popowich, who you just heard from, who had shared with us the personal and financial impact of having an inactive well on his property with no owner or timeline for cleanup, like a lot of landowners in Alberta. And Ecojustice now has the privilege of representing Mr. Popowich. And we looked into how the mass recommendations had been developed. And as lawyers, we were pretty interested in that. And what we found was troubling. David Yeager was hired with public funds to develop the mature asset strategy before it was released last spring. And Mr. Yeager was paid $292,000 to lead the process. And he was given that through 2 sole source contracts, meaning that no one else could apply for the job. And he developed the recommendations through months of closed door discussions. So mostly with oil and gas companies. There was no public engagement. So the public wasn't invited during the mass process. And he led the mass process while serving as the special advisor to the Premier, Daniel Smith. As someone being paid with public tax dollars, Mr. Yeager was supposed to be leading a process in the public interest. However, Mr. Yeager has many other jobs and represents many other competing interests at the same time. So in addition to being special advisor to the Premier and also running the mass process, he's a board member of the Alberta Energy Regulator. So that's the independent regulator that is supposed to oversee the oil and gas industry. And then at the same time as all that, according to his website, he's a consultant for oil and gas companies and was advertising for new business. The tagline on his website, even today, I checked this afternoon, is, quote, helping oil and gas service companies achieve success, end quote. And that's where we believe there is a conflict of interest. In our opinion, it's impossible to represent the interests of a partisan government, an independent regulator, private companies, and then represent the public in creating the mature asset strategy all at the same time. So, we've alleged these many roles created an open and apparent conflict, and it should have disqualified him from leading this mass process that's supposed to clean up such an important issue for Albertans. So, because bottom line, if you have a flawed process like this that is tainted with conflicts of interest, you get a flawed product. I mean, that's part of why rules like this are in place. Otherwise, it completely undermines public trust. So, on behalf of Mr. Popovich, we filed an investigation request with the Alberta Ethics Commissioner for breaches of the Conflict of Interest Act, as well as breaches of Alberta's government procurement and sole sourcing policy. And we're calling on the Ethics Commissioner to launch a full investigation into these issues. And since we filed our request, over 1,700 other people have sent an email to the Ethics Commissioner asking him to take action on this issue. And so if you also want to do that, you can do the same. The link will be shared in the chat, or you can go to Ecojustice's website, ecojustice.ca, and send your own email sharing your concerns about how public dollars were spent on this, how important this issue is, and how troubling the way that this mass strategy was created. And finally, the polluter pays principle, that companies pay to clean up their own mess, is a fundamental legal concept that needs to be upheld here. And that's why Ecojustice is involved in this issue. As Albertans, we can't accept an industry-run process led by an industry consultant that excludes public input and may leave taxpayers with a multi-billion-dollar cleanup bill. It's unacceptable. And that's why we're working to stop it.
Thank you, Susanne, and thanks to the Ecojustice team for highlighting this just egregious conflict of interest. All right, so you might be asking yourself, what's next for us in this campaign? Where do we go from here? But I will turn it over to Philip.
Yeah, thanks, folks. Yeah, as Steve mentioned, yeah, what's next for this group? What's next for CARE? Where are we going with this campaign? So we are under the assumption that we're expecting the government of Alberta to try and legislate parts of the mature asset strategy, at least some of the recommendations, at the end of this October. So when the legislature resumes this fall. Our goal as a group is for the government to abandon this industry drafted scheme and to ensure that companies pay to clean up their mess. As you've heard tonight, this is an issue that affects all of us, from rural Albertans to city dwellers, from individual landowners with this infrastructure on their land to entire municipalities who are getting screwed out of tax money. It's affecting people who are young and old because all of us rely on our public services. And it's also an issue that affects both settlers and Indigenous peoples to this place. So in a neat way, that this is an issue that actually unites us in a common front, because the root cause of this problem is that actually our government keeps putting the profit margins of oil and gas companies above its own people. And we, all of us, like everyone here on this call, everyone who lives in this province, we have to work together if we want to change that. That's because our leaders, they don't make decisions in our interests unless we have the people power that's needed to actually hold them accountable. We have to be the reason that they feel the heat. We know from firsthand experience that the government is scared. They've faced strong vocal opposition from rural residents at a number of recent town hall events, and that opposition is growing. Our plan as a coalition is that we are going to host a number of in-person town halls across Alberta over the next 1 to 2 months. We have upcoming rural events already scheduled in Falher, in the Peace region, kind of up towards Grand Prairie, and Vegreville in sort of like east central Alberta, out by Dwight. Those are both coming up this October. on October 16th and October 22nd, as well as soon to be scheduled urban town halls in Calgary and Edmonton, and potentially more. So if you would like to volunteer to help us organize a town hall, or even just help us on the day of some of these events, we need people like you to get involved. Even if you just want to put up campaign posters around your community to educate people about this issue, let people know the town halls are happening, to tell people about the mature asset strategy, because this was largely done under wraps. A lot of people just don't know this is happening. If you would like to get involved with us, please let us know by typing organize into the chat box. We're saving the chat, so we'll be able to go back and follow up with you after tonight's event. We really can't do this alone, but when people work together, we win. So we need to get to work, and we need to make sure that our government scraps its plans and forces these companies to clean up their mess. That's it for the speaking points. I'm going to hand it back to Steve for the Q&A portion of the event. And yeah, we'll share the Q&A submission form again. So thank you all for being here, and yeah, looking forward to answering some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Philip, for that, and of course for hosting this event tonight and pulling all this together. This is the Q&A portion of the night, so please feel free to pop some questions into the Q&A for us. I think first of all, I would just ask. I want to go back to Dwight. And we talk a lot about the expenses that are, or everything that's owed to you so far. What kind of cost has it been for your time, and do you think for the time on everybody else to work on this and working on this for years? What kind of cost do you feel like landowners have been facing on this? Dwight might need his microphone unmuted.
Yeah, sorry, I was managing the Q&A form.
There we go.
There.
Got it. Yeah, it's when we first had a well drilled in our land, it really wasn't affecting a heck of a lot because the check would show up every year, a month before the date that it was due, and we would simply cash it. And on everything that went on, if you had a few problems, you'd phone the company now and then, and they would deal with it. But in 2017, that all changed. That's when we ended up with a bankrupt producer on our land, and now I spend hours, filling out paperwork, and as landowners, now you have to look after that site. You have to deal with the weeds. You have to do all those things that these sites were looked after at one time, and now falls on you. You can get some of this stuff reclaimed, like claiming it through the Land and Property Rights Tribunal. You can do a Section 28, for instance, to get back some of the costs for weeds and all that sort of stuff. And that's the taxpayers paying for that, folks. And I'll remind everybody, there's 900 of Sequoia landowners. That's just one company. There's hundreds waiting in the wings that are going to go under. There's more coming. And we had Vitor Marciano admit that, him and Jaeger, at a landowners meeting, that there's more of these coming. So that means the taxpayer is going to be paying even more. And for landowners, we're saying, look, we're supposed to be paid for all the time we spend. We're not getting a fair shake often at the Land and Property Rights Tribunal either. We're not getting paid our full costs for our actual time. It takes a lot of time to fill out these forms, stay on top of this stuff, handle the weeds, make sure nobody's damaging these sites, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like there's stuff to recoup there, and the longer it takes to recoup, the more that should become available. I guess a question just for the panel generally. At one point, $1.7 billion was offered from the federal government to the UCP to clean up orphan wells. Who wants to speak about what happened with that $1.7 billion offer?
Well, interestingly, what I saw from it, we didn't really get any more wells cleaned up out of it. We didn't create any more jobs out of it. I really think that what happened was a lot of these companies, the companies that do have budgets set aside for cleanup, as soon as they heard there was, government money coming in, they stopped spending their own and waited for the federal money to show up. So that's basically all they did, is replace their spending with our money, and we really never clean up it. Matter of fact, the Alberta government had to give back, I think it was 135 million or something along that line, give it back. They didn't even spend it. You got to ask what the heck that was all about. We hear our government railing about how we don't get help from Ottawa and they send you money and then you have to send it back because you didn't spend it. There's something wrong here, definitely.
Mark, I saw you put a hand up there.
Yeah, well, one billion of that 1.7 million was allotted to Alberta. They started something called the Site Rehabilitation Program, and contractors would apply to the provincial government who managed the federal funds to retire inactive wells. So it did not go to orphan well spending. There was most of the benefactors are the big companies. CNRL and Canna, et cetera, were the big benefactors. They're also the people that pay most of the money into the orphan well fund when there's orphan funds. So they got back a gift from the federal government who broke the polluter pay principle by giving this money to these companies in Alberta to create jobs during COVID. So that's essentially what happened. As Dwight said, not all of that money was spent, but a lot of we did reduce the inactive wells in Alberta by approximately 10,000 wells, thanks to that federal money. But the federal government also, I heard the federal minister talking about it. Part of the deal was that money was to come to Alberta in return for making sure that this orphan well program and inactive well problem in Alberta would be handled so there wouldn't need to be any more federal money spent on it ever again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then how can we actually fight this sort of injustice from the oil and gas industry when our province's premier themselves facilitates it as a puppet of that industry? They know we don't support this and they don't care. Can we somehow circumvent the UCP to remove their ability to control this? Maybe Philip, do you want to take that?
Yeah, good question, tough question. But that's why we organize, and that's why we have to do this together. The premier needs to feel the heat, not just from, let's say, one segment who's against this, but they need to feel this from their own constituents, right? Like, this is an issue, like we said, that impacts all Albertans. There are people from all walks of the political life with this infrastructure on their land, and we need those people speaking out too. Like, there has to be a credible threat to people's like re-electing, like the chance of them getting re-elected. So we do need people across the political divide speaking up and pushing back. So that's the work of organizing. That's why we do this together. That's why we have to build and grow together, and why we need more people involved in this fight. So hopefully that helps. It's not easy. It's not easy work. It's not cookie cutter, but that's the work in front of us. Maybe after the next question, we did get a message from Bill Heidecker, who's the president of the Alberta Surface Rights Federation, who participated in the MAS process. So while the next question is being asked, I'm just going to try to facilitate getting Bill to join. He wanted to share some thoughts. I think it would be great to hear from him. So I'm just going to work to spotlight him and get him a chance to speak. But we'll go to the next question first.
Sure. I think this is primarily for Dwight or Mark. Can you refuse the oil company drilling on your land? And if so, why don't more do that? Go ahead, Mark.
The only time you can stop them is when they come on their land looking to do the seismic. That's when you can say no. Chances are, if they don't find anything, they're not coming back. But if you let them on, they find something, they're coming back, and you will not stop them after that.
Yeah,
Mark?
well, it's not quite that simple. In fact, you can say no to an oil company, and you should say no to an oil company or a pipeline company or a power line company if they want to come on your land and something's not right. That could be a licensing problem, a compensation problem, a root problem, or a myriad of other problems. You can say no. However, if they want on your land, they will go to the Land and Property Rights Tribunal, and if they have a license, permit, or other approval, they will force their way onto your land through something called a right of entry order. Then there's supposed to be a series of hearings to sort out these issues and make sure that the entry is legal, the entry is properly compensated for, etc. The people can sign an agreement to let oil companies on their land rather than go through the process I've just said. So ultimately, they can force their way onto your land, but I want to stress that people can and should, and you can ask for consent right of entry orders. We've got this choice in Alberta. Landowners have two terrible choices: a one-sided agreement or a right of entry order issued by a board with no enforcement. So that's the two terrible choices we have as landowners in Alberta. So in reality, we can't successfully keep oil and gas off our land, and therefore it was to be compensated as if it's was a compulsory taking or similar to an expropriation.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, Bill, yeah, I think you should be able to speak now. I don't know if I can like pin your video if it's off. So, but if you just want to speak, that's okay.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna speak right now. Hey, look, I think you guys done a great job here getting people out to talk about this. It's extremely important for everyone. You guys have already focused on that, the fact that this isn't just about landowners. It is an Albertan issue, taxpayers, anyone related, that enjoys having our clean and healthy environment. So it's really key. But given the complexity of these issues, and I mean, look, it's a fairly convoluted and long report. I don't expect that everybody's read it and digested it. So I want to highlight two of the key things that, just haven't been touched on yet. And when we start talking about mature assets, in the document, there's a lot of talk about what could define that. But people need to understand that there is no firm definition of what a mature asset is, in the sense that there's no like chronological timeline, it had to have been drilled within these years, or it had to been in this, strata, or limited to this particular geographic region of Alberta. No, it's simply any well that is no longer economical. Okay, so that's key, because when you look at what got us into this mess, it's really twofold. It's that, one, there's never been a back-end date for having to clean up these wells once they're no longer producing. So what's happened is that companies have run the numbers and decided that it's easier to pay $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 a year to just have it sit than spend the hundreds of thousands of years to actually clean it up. That's the math they've used. So you can't fault them on, it's good math, but they never should have been allowed to do that. Point being, there's no back-end date when they have to clean them up or even initiate cleanup. And secondly, there was never any money set aside for them to clean it up down the road. So as you guys already touched on the other issues with them trading from, stronger to weaker hands, where they don't have the funds or the intention to clean them up. The key being, when you put those 2 points together, is that there's no definition of what a mature asset strategy other than being non-economical. And the key part, if this was a mature asset strategy and there was a strategy to stop it from happening in the future, a logical person would first tackle those two things. One, put a back-end date in when these things have to start getting cleaned up, or have a deadline that be cleaned up outright, or start collecting money. That is not in this mature asset strategy. So what you're doing is as trite as this is, I believe it's the definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing, expecting different results. So we are continuing to do this. It's going to happen again and again, because any well drilled today is guaranteed to be non-economical in the future. It might be 1 year, it might be 10 years, depending on the decline rate, depending on the market. But every well drilled today is going to become a mature asset, and there's still no commitment to having like a hard deadline when they cleaned up or start putting money aside. And then I'm just going to finish it by saying that, Brian Jean's office, October 2nd, that's today, their mandate letter is to implement a roadmap to reach 300 million barrels of oil production in 2030 and 8 million in 2035. So those items are going. Excuse me, I got a kid to do. I'm talking.
No, I'm going to go deaf.
Okay, go.
Dad, this isn't really.
Okay, sorry, I got a little guy that needs help.
That's okay.
Anyway, my point being, we're asking to double production, yet we aren't even closing solving the problem, why things are happening. I'm gonna have to mute off. Sorry, Philip, but I just want to make sure everybody understands the fundamentals, that there is no actual strategy to fix the fundamental problem.
No, that's really helpful context. Thank you, Bill. Yeah.
That was Bill Heidecker and family. Bill, president of the Alberta Surface Rights Federation. Thanks for coming on and sharing the wisdom there, Bill. I want to address a question to Susanne. What legal avenues can be taken to hold these companies to account if the government refuses to act?
Okay, there I am. There are legal ways in which you could sue both the company and the companies that sold it. There's cases like that in the United States, but none that I know of that have been brought in Canada. And so it's something to be thought about, but litigation is very expensive, and it's, the last resort. It takes many years and it takes a lot of resources. But if that's what it takes, I think that's something that lots of organizations are looking into and considering, that other organizations and landowners and people around the world have already brought as far as class actions. But as with all legal things, it really depends on the circumstances, the situation, and the people involved.
Yeah, well, I see Dwight's put a hand up there. Go ahead, Dwight.
I just wanted to mention in the instance of Sequoia that the receiver did go after the previous sellers of those wells, trying to, we'll say it was more of a fraudulent deal than anything else. Interestingly, they couldn't make it stick, but they did get $30 million settlement out of them. Still left, I know it was over 300 million that still got transferred in liability to Sequoia from Paramount and Perpetual, I guess it would be. So they still come out of it smelling like a rose. But the point is that somebody did try to go after him, and you can see that it isn't always successful to try to sue. It's very costly, and these guys have been doing this stuff for 30 some years. The liability dumping is not brand new. It's been going on for 30 years, and that is why we have the problem we have today. It is caused by liability dumping. The mature asset strategy would have everybody believe that the industry has no fault in this at all, but that is not true. This was industry created. This is what they wanted. They had said in 1991, we promise that we will pay for the cleanup of any bankrupt producer if you allow us to continue liability dumping. That was the deal. And they were to fund it by the Orphan Well Fund, which is now, of course, been underfunded and is a safety net for us taxpayers that's full of holes and needs to be looked after properly.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, go ahead, Suzanne.
Just to add to that, Dwight, that's an excellent point. Part of the trouble is that what's happening is not illegal, right? It is how the system is set up. The AER, they approve transfer applications from solvent companies to companies that don't have any assets that can't clean this up, and that's approved, and they are allowed to do this, as Bill Heidecker said and brought that up. There's no timelines for cleaning up wells. The way the law is set up, there's no security. And so, that is how it's set up, unfortunately.
Since 1991, the Orphan Well Fund has been used as an excuse not to take security and to turn a blind eye to these deals. That's why we have the mess we have.
Question for Philip. How are the oil sands tied into the MAS? I know they're trying to find a way to dump all the tailings into the Athabasca River or pump underground. Can you say a few words on that?
Yeah, good question. So MAS primarily applies to the conventional side of the industry. So you're typical pump jacks as you see on the screen right now. And like wells, pipelines, that sort of thing. But both are polluter pays issues. In both instances, the government and our regulator have like set things up in a way that we don't collect money up front from industry. The oil sands is like a whole other side to this issue that's equally as bad and almost as much money. And so it's not directly tied, doesn't directly tie into MAS, but they are related. They're both, what we're seeing here is two examples of the same problem, just on different sides of the industry.
Okay, we keep getting questions for Dwight, which I think is appropriate, given that he's a landowner and experiencing it all firsthand. But yeah, you've called on other landowners to be brave and come forward with their own stories. Are other landowners that you know, do they feel afraid to speak or about the current problems with this situation? And if so, how can we help?
Well, it's not easy standing up and saying to your government, you've got it wrong. And
Right.
you know, many people don't want to rock the boat. They just want to live a quiet life. That's why many of us are in rural Alberta in the first place. We want this quiet country life. And then these sorts of things begin to happen to us. So it's not easy. But the biggest problem is many of us were under the impression that we would be looked after by the AER or by the Land and Property Rights Tribunal. They would look after our rights. Well, they haven't done that at all. Matter of fact, you'll find they'll go out of their way to ignore your rights. And when it comes down to treating landowners, or when it comes to the AER, many times they just treat you as if you don't exist any longer. Well, especially if you signed a lease, it's like you don't have any interest anymore. So you know, that sort of thing. But I do encourage landowners to start speaking up more and more. Start, you know, letting people know, tell your story. Uh, this has been going on for a long, long time, and we really haven't had our stories told. Mark Doran has an interesting stories. There's neighbors around me that have interesting stories too, and we're finally starting to get some of these together, and we're starting to document some of these. And I hope you know, we're going to get something together here that's going to start pointing that this problem is a lot bigger than people are realizing, and is affecting a lot more people than it's realizing.
Yeah, okay. And then a question for Dr. Campbell about the health hazards. I'm sure Dwight you can speak on this as well, but how does a landowner know how toxic or dangerous might an abandoned well might be to his family and to the livestock and his animals?
Well, it's an unknown question because all the wells are slightly different and they'll all be emitting different toxins and different amounts of those toxins over time. But as a general rule, there's substantive increases in cancers and heart attacks, strokes, dementias, birth defects. These types of things are very important issues for the people in those communities. A lot more research needs to be done about the exact toxins that are there and what they're doing, and that it's a very serious oversight that this is a major industry that is affecting all life forms in humans close to the wells, and it's been under monitored and under researched. One of the questions I had for Susanne was, should they be a class action lawsuit? These are the major causes of death and disability, and they may be going up by 20% in some of the people who are close to these wells. And no, you don't know what it's doing to your cattle or your crops or the fish or the water, but it certainly doesn't look very good. It needs a lot more research and government action.
Just wanted to add that sweet natural gas has no smell, no odor to it at all. You would not even know it's there. What you smell in your house, that's an odorant that has been added for safety reasons. So you do smell it if it's leaking. If you're a landowner and you have a sweet sour gas on your land, you will not know if it is leaking without actually testing for that.
I'm going to go
Mark would
to
probably have.
Yeah, Suzanne was asked a question, so maybe I'll just get a response from Suzanne, and then we'll go right to you, Mark.
So the question was about a class action for health impacts of wells. Norm, I'd love to talk to you. I would love to talk to any landowner that feels that they, have been impacted because of their well and their health has been impacted. And I know there's lots of landowners. So I really hope that landowners share their story tonight. And also anyone who has a story wants to get in touch with us at Ecojustice, ecojustice.ca. I would love to have further conversations after this about it.
Thanks. We hope they take you up on that. Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, when an operator acquires rights to use a portion, I want to stress a portion of someone's property for an oil and gas activity, they're supposed to keep their dangerous gases on site until they're no longer harmful. Gases that drift off site are trespass. Anything that occurs off site, the operator has acquired no rights whatsoever to be on that. It's a trespass. There are laws about minimum site size in Alberta. They are the minimum well site and facility site sizes are to be, those laws are to be enforced by the licensee. They're absolutely, totally, completely ignored in Alberta. The vast majority of well sites in Alberta are far too small by law. Farmers are getting too close to this stuff. There's explosion hazards, there's health risks. It's absolutely atrocious out here. I want to stress one thing. The operator's personnel show up for a few moments a day or a few hours a day at most on the site, and the landowner is left there who has no training, no hazardous area training usually, no other training, and they're left there to breathe these gases, and they're exposed to these risks. Alberta Health Services is partially responsible for ensuring this doesn't happen. They're not even in the picture. It's atrocious what happens in Alberta in terms of landowner and citizen safety at and near well sites. I want to stress that stronger than anything else I might say tonight.
Dwight, I saw a hand up there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, these are industrial sites that are in our backyards, and yet producer, when they come to the landowner and they want to drill these sites, they're going to encourage that farmer or rancher to be working right up next to these well sites. In my case, I had requested that a fence be put around the whole well site to keep my children were that was their playground, and so I wanted to make sure they were safe. Well, the company refused to do that and said, "Well, you won't be able to farm right up next to it." And at that time, it didn't dawn on me that there are safety reasons that we're not supposed to be on these sites. That's why there's a minimum size to these sites. And that's why, like Mark has just finished saying, these guys are supposed to keep these dangerous gases off and we're being told the exact opposite. And the reason for that is because the producer then doesn't have to clean up weeds on these sites because he gets the farmer or the rancher to do it for him. They're willing to put us landowners at risk so they don't have to pay to clean up some weeds. That is disgusting. But that is what's going on.
And then I guess for the panel, how do we counter the nation building narrative when it comes to the responsibility of orphaned oil wells? Philip, you want to take that?
Yeah, I was just gonna offer. I think Bill hit on this when Bill briefly joined us. We have a government that is stating a wish to like expand double oil and gas production in Alberta, and wants the federal government to fast track new energy projects like in the name of nation building. But as Bill said, there's no plan to clean up what's already there. There's 300,000 plus oil and gas wells across our province, whether they're mature or still active. And companies have failed to clean up after decades of development already. So I think the way we tie into this nation building narrative or push back against it is like, why don't we make industry clean up their mess before approving any new projects?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Then again, for something like that to happen, you'd have to have like a regulator, and so as far as what is the Alberta Energy Regulator doing versus what it should be doing? I know that's a large topic, but maybe somebody can just give a brief couple of sentences so we know, because these are the people who are supposed to be overseeing this stuff, right?
Yeah, I think Mark, I mean, keep it short, but I think Mark knows best.
Sorry, I was looking at the chat. Somebody had asked me a question. Could you repeat?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to repeat that, Steve?
Sure, I was just saying that, it would seem that we're missing somebody regulating all this, and we've got an Alberta energy regulator. What is it that they're doing currently, as opposed to what they should be doing, to manage this problem?
That's a really difficult but valid question. For all intents and purposes, for anyone but industry members, we really don't have an effective regulator. We have pretty good laws in Alberta. There's a remedy for everything that we've discussed tonight. I've got lots of clients. I can't get one of those remedies, especially if it comes from the Alberta Energy Regulator. They are either captured or incompetent or both. The reason why, we just don't know. But no, we just don't. We need regulatory reform in Alberta. I talked even to oil company executives about it, and the comment is, everyone in Calgary knows that the regulator is a joke or is just, the industry knows it. It's just that I think industry benefits more often than not from it. So that's the core of our problem. That's the reason I joined CARE, is to try to get regulatory reform in Alberta. The number one thing that they're not doing properly, in my view, they're not holding hearings. Everything's decided in a back room. And I've just looked into we've only ever held 6 or 7 hearings on an application in Alberta since we got the Alberta Energy Regulator 13 years ago. That's appalling. And the ones that I've looked at where there was a hearing, they just circumvented the hearing anyway. And I can prove that. And in fact, I will prove that soon. So we essentially just have a rubber stamp for a regulator, and that's a real problem. And it's going to cost people their lives. It's going to cost people their property value. It's going to cost each individual up to $30,000 or $40,000 individually to clean up the mess if we don't reform this regulator. It's probably the most serious problem in our province.
Dwight, I saw you put a hand up there.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the mature asset strategy, when the report was written, it actually points to the major problem that we have with the regulators, the fact that we have a regulator and a facilitator in one. When you look at the mandate letter, it's about producing oil, and that facilitation production end of it has actually become the focus at the expense of the regulatory end of it. The mature asset strategy report itself basically said that the industry wasn't doing enough the regulator wasn't doing enough to help industry, and that they needed to beef the AER up so they could help the industry even more. Very little, matter of fact, I don't think anything was even mentioned about its regulatory uh, process at all, about fixing any of that. It just talked about making it better for industry. And that is the problem. The industry sees the AER as working for them, not as a regulator. They see him as a facilitator. We need to separate these two functions, or you're going to have this mess going on forever.
Yeah, and so, I mean, to kind of wrap all this up together, I'm reminded a little bit about the whole coal issue when I talk about this, in that there's both rural and urban. Those divides get transcended. People don't want our water getting polluted like that. I think there's similarities to this. What about coming together? Rural urban divide. Or tying together with other issues like parents and teachers that are angered by the UCP approach to education or to healthcare. Is there a coalition that can be built out of all this?
Yeah, maybe I'm best placed to take that one, Steve. Yeah, I mean, as we sort of like started out, or like as I started out in the intro, that's kind of where the Coalition for Responsible Energy came from. MAS is just one of the fights, but we need everybody on board if we're gonna like win on any of these issues. We did get a question in the chat that was about whether unions are aware. There's obviously the discussion around the teachers' strike. the Coalition for Responsible Energy, we're diverse, we're growing. We've got landowners, we've got rural Albertans, we've got environmental groups, we've got health professionals like Norm, we've got legal support. But yeah, we need, you know, you need more. You have to build a big tent to win this stuff. And we have to demonstrate to teachers and to nurses that this hurts them too. Like this is a problem that's impacting them. You know, they've got already a lot on their plate. But I wonder if all those teachers who are going on strike next week also knew about what the government is planning to do and the amount of public money that could be given away when you know their class sizes are huge or they're running out of supplies. You know, this is an issue that affects all of us. We have to do the work to bring everyone together. We can't just assume that someone's going to read about the MAS online and just suddenly fight back. We got to bring them along. So yeah, that's the work to be done. I also want to recognize earlier on in tonight's program, we did a poll, and I think 8% of the people who responded to that poll, 8% of you said that you were personally affected. And so I do think, oh, it's actually, what do we got? Okay, yeah, 8% personally affected. So that's still a sizable chunk of people here on this call. Like I understand it can be tough or scary to come forward, but we're trying to make a safe and secure place for people. We understand that, you know, the personal impacts are different, but that's what we, you know, what we exist to do. On the slide here is my email. I can post it again in the chat. If you want to reach out one-on-one and have a chat first, just to get to know each other before you share your story, that's okay too. And yeah, so I did want to circle back to that because I thought that was an important takeaway. Yeah, and maybe, okay, I see Dr. Campbell's got his hand up. Let's go quickly there.
Sure. Thank you so much. The Alberta Health Professionals for the Environment is a coalition of the major health organizations in Alberta, nurses, pharmacists, family doctors, and other groups. And so they're trying to refocus all the health professionals around environmental issues. There was a talk of getting various education groups together, teachers from really kindergarten to universities, also aligned on environmental issues. But this is a whole of society problem. This is not about environmentalists or farmers. This is about every Albertan, regardless of their walks of life, getting together to ensure that we have a province for our future generations of all life forms, but we're particularly interested in our own. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Norm, and indeed, sorry, Dr. Campbell, and indeed, thanks all of our speakers tonight. Your stories and your knowledge needs to get out there to the people. I also want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight to learn more about this and in some cases to air your grievances. We appreciate you spending your time with us. Please consider supporting this campaign and go and check out the website, spelunk around a little bit. There's all of those different calls to action that we put out in front of you tonight. This thing gets fixed when the government feels enough pressure from enough of us. As long as it's just a lone landowner here or there, they can kick that ball down the field forever. But if they feel the pressure, and the pressure comes from people like you, then they'll have to back down. They won't have a choice. So that's the mission. It's the right thing for us to do, and I urge you to join the fight. It's just clearly the right thing to do. I want to thank Philip and his team for bringing this project together here and allowing us to come together on this Thursday night. Thanks, everybody.